comes and goes. Across the spine of the country, damp conditions, low clouds and also some patchy rain. But through the latter part of the day, some brighter weather emerging across the southwest. Temperatures then typically coming in around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. And then it turns windy yet again on Friday with further spells of rain, showers to follow on Saturday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. My name is Simon Evans and very shortly my comedian guests and I will be taking a look through tomorrow's newspapers. But first, here's Polly with the news headlines.
Thank you. The top stories tonight. The Ukrainian president has told MPs in this country his country will fight to the end, echoing the British war leader Sir Winston Churchill in his address. Volodymyr Zelensky was met with a standing ovation from the House of Commons as he appeared via a video link. The address came shortly after the UK and the United States announced a ban on Russian oil imports. Britain is to phase them out by the end of the year, while America says it will also ban gas imports. President Zelensky thanked Boris Johnson for his support but asked for more help with the war.
We will not give up and we will not lose. We will fight till the end at sea, in the air. We will continue fighting for our land, whatever the cost. We will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets.
President Zelensky. Well, Poland has agreed to hand over all its MiG-29 fighter jets to the US ahead of a likely transfer to Ukraine. It's part of a plan to provide aircraft to the Ukrainian armed forces. The Polish government says the planes are ready to deploy immediately and are free of charge and is calling on NATO to follow its lead. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State for Transport here, Grant Shapps, has announced he's made it a criminal offence for any Russian aircraft to enter UK airspace. And Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says 5,000 civilians have been evacuated. It's the first successful humanitarian corridor opened since the start of Russia's invasion, created under a temporary ceasefire agreement. The United Nations Refugee Agency estimates the number leaving the country has now reached 2 million. Starbucks is yet another organisation this evening to announce it's suspending business in Russia. The coffee giant said it would provide support to the near 2,000 partners over there. And it follows Coca-Cola and McDonald's, who earlier announced they were pausing operations in Russia as the isolation of Moscow deepens. In other news today, it's been announced that Prince Andrew has paid his financial settlement to his accuser, Virginia Giuffre. A document filed by both parties to a New York court called for the civil sexual assault action to be dismissed following the deal. The Duke of York has always denied the claims and did not admit liability as part of the settlement. Social media sites and search engines will legally have to stop scam adverts appearing on their platforms. It's part of updated proposals to the Online Safety Bill. The government says the change would protect people from scams where criminals impersonate others to steal personal data or break into bank accounts. That's all from me on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. This is GB News. Now back to headliners.
Thank you, Polly. Hello and welcome to Headliners. My name is Simon Evans, and on this International Women's Day, let me introduce you to our all-male panel. We aren't trying to be pointed about it, it's just the way the dice have fallen tonight. I'm joined by Steve N. Allen and Andrew Doyle. How are you, Andrew and
we should
Steve
have thought
N?
about that, shouldn't we, in terms of the...
Well, maybe we should, but I think it's a sign of progress that it's no longer such a PR disaster.
Well, I don't know. Even the word Andrew means manly, doesn't it? So
does it?
So we're really going for the masculinity. Yeah.
It's obviously used
rebranding.
Ironically.
Not really. Yeah, it was
Feel
an
your
ironic
parents
christening.
tugging your foot when they said... Do you know what Simon means?
I don't.
Snub-nosed.
Oh.
It's like, as in simian, monkey face,
Yes.
basically. That was obviously optimistic
What's
as
wrong
well.
with our parents, honestly?
What's Stephen?
I've got no idea. Probably something fancy. It's
Yeah.
like leader or just better, maybe.
Gauzy, I think it means. I don't know why I said that. Diaphanous.
Oh, nice.
You know, just for Ladies' Day. It's not Ladies' Day, is it? That's ASCA. International Ladies' Day. Popsies. Anyway.
We definitely needed women on the panel.
We do, I'm afraid so. Let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. The Telegraph has Poland offers fighter jets for Ukraine. We'll be covering that story shortly. And Johnson considers lifting fracking ban to ease reliance on Putin's oil. The Guardian has blow to Putin. Britain and US ban Russian oil and shutting up shop. Chains pull out of Russia. We will also be covering that. The Financial Times has US bans Russian oil as shelling forces Ukraine to halt fresh evacuation bid, and Golden Arches bend to pressure. I think that's Golden Arches bend to pressure as McDonald's close Russian restaurants. The Times has Ukraine to get NATO jets and a picture of the House of Commons applauding Zelensky on that live feed that you saw in the news just then. The Express goes with "We'll fight in the forests, fields and on shores." Zelensky channeling Churchill. The Sun runs with brave Brit or ignores orders. Queen's Guard AWOL to fight Vlad. Squaddy 19 abandons post for Ukraine. Standing ovation for Ukraine leader's historic speech in the Metro. Hear, hear, hero. The Daily Star has Klitschko exclusive, biggest fight of my life. Brave boxing hero speaks to the Daily Star. Those are the headlines. Let's get in. So the big story from the United Kingdom's point of view, and we are, of course, as ever, the main character in this war, Volodymyr Zelensky got a standing ovation as he addressed Parliament. This is from Wednesday's Metro, Andrew, although I think every other newspaper ran with the same story.
Most of the papers have gone with the image of the packed House of Commons. Everybody watching the speech, which was broadcast directly into the House of Commons, it receiving plaudits from both the right and the left, from Johnson and Starmer, and Zelensky was obviously, as you've seen, invoking the spirit of Winston Churchill. He was specifically said that he would fight them in the forests, on the shores, etc. So he was in the fields, in the streets. And it's interesting.
On the landing strips.
Just everywhere. He will fight them. And it was, a very passionate speech for obvious reasons. It had the desired impact. But it's interesting that there were elements of the speech that were deliberately sort of calling for a no-fly zone, for instance. So there was sort of it was a plea for a no-fly zone, which of course so many people have made this point that it's a reckless thing to do in terms of the potential of escalating this to a nuclear war.
Well, you can say we could announce a no-fly zone. It's enforcing the no-fly zone, isn't it? That becomes risky.
Of course, because if you do that, you're shooting down Russian jets, and then NATO is in a war, and that who knows? But it's interesting that Brendan O'Neill made a very interesting point about that in Spike this week, and he was talking about the way in which this spectre of fear surrounding a nuclear power, that there are consequences to that too. It's almost saying that if you've got a massive nuclear arsenal, you can get away with whatever you want, and you can go into a neighbouring country and invade, and no one will do anything, and that's not a good precedent to set for other countries that might be interested in acquiring those.
70 years we've had, maybe not mutually assured destruction for 70 years, but 70 years this basic model has sufficed to restrain people, and yet it's taken Putin to go, well, hang on, why don't, if they're afraid of it? What do you think, Steve?
Yes, you're right. You only need to say there's a no-fly zone. Policing it is the issue, but you wouldn't want to announce one without policing it.
No.
Because you'd look so weak. Imagine if you then let Putin fly through your no-fly zone, things would start to roll in his direction.
I haven't. I'm not militarily expert to comment, and the fog of war descended very quickly, and it's very hard to be certain. But I don't get the sense that air superiority has been crucial to Russia's strategy this far, anyway. Really,
this is true. It's mostly ground forces, so there is the risk, isn't there, that with a no-fly zone or anything close to that, it's sort of a gesture that wouldn't really achieve anything anyway. So there's that element to it. But there's been a lot of debate around that.
It's always fighting last year's war, isn't it? It's always been the crucial element with the Middle Eastern conflicts and so on.
Yeah.
But, he channeled Churchill anyway, and that's quite flattering because it suggests that he knows Boris Johnson is Churchill's premier biographer.
Yes, I wouldn't agree with that assessment, but he certainly knows that Boris wrote a book about Churchill, and I think it's more about the Britishness of the whole thing. He also invoked Shakespeare. He raised the
He didn't
Hamlet
mention
question.
Jimmy Savile, though, did he? There was no mention.
No, he was selective about his references.
To get Starmer on board. McDonald's has temporarily closed all of its 850 stores in Russia, Steve. This seems like a naked, blatant attempt to improve the nutritional life of the Russian people at the time of their darkest need.
Possibly, but more shops pulling out of Russia. We've got McDonald's and Starbucks mentioned in the article. Russia will soon have more empty shops than every high street in Britain. So they've temporarily pulled down the shutters on McDonald's. They have 850 restaurants.
Do they remove the Ronalds? Are the Ronalds sort of withdrawn back in? Can you see the Ronalds, do you think, through the window? Back into storage? Or like a dust sheet over the Ronalds? Are they toppled like Lenin's statues, do you think?
Do they still have Ronalds?
Because they've got long shoes.
Oh, they always have Ronalds,
do they have the Hamburglar?
I think the Hamburglar is like a kind of temporary. I think he comes and goes a bit.
Oh, I see.
I do remember this as it was one of those talking points that people used to share with a certain amount of wearying predictability in dinner parties in the 90s, that no two countries that had a McDonald's had ever gone to war.
Oh, nice.
Remember, it was like a kind of version of no two democracies have ever gone to war, which wasn't true either. But it feels like this is like another taboo that Putin has broken now.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was one of those tweets that went viral regarding this issue, and this man called Jimmy Salford, and he wrote, Russia has already been cut off from CNN, Pornhub and Facebook. The US is now working on depriving Russians of McDonald's and Coca-Cola. If they keep going with these sanctions, Russians will soon be among the healthiest, well-adjusted and best-informed people on the planet.
I don't know about best informed, least misinformed.
Least misinformed might have been. There probably wasn't the characters to get away with that as a treat, but I thought that was a sort of nice...
I don't know how I feel about Pornhub. I think I'd leave Pornhub in there, to be honest. That would weaken their troops significantly, wouldn't it? You know, yeah. I don't know if it's true what they say.
It's also worth adding in at the bottom of the article, it said Unilever suspended all imports and exports in and out of Russia.
Right.
Well, that's everything.
Yeah.
Even if you don't recognise the brand, if you look in the little advert...
Sunny Delight.
Do they do Sunny Delight?
They used to. Somebody used to do a routine about that. How they discovered when they broke it down, they thought that's a bit odd. Unilever, that's a cleaning product company making an orange juice, and then they had a look at the ingredients of Sunny Delight. And go, oh, actually, that's pretty much on brand.
That makes sense because if you make cleaning products, also sell things that stain.
Yes, that does.
Very clever.
But this must be having an effect on the Russian people insofar as all these restaurants shutting down, all these cafes, the banking system, and at the same time they're being told that something very different is happening and that this isn't a war.
That they're rescuing these people from a fascist...
But surely at this point, I mean, you know, you'd start to think, hang on a minute, this isn't quite right. This is, you know...
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think he's created so much confusion about the media. I mean, obviously there's a control of the media, but I think we've discussed this before. But Putin's and his team, their approach is not so much what we used to think of as like a kind of telling lies, as just undermining the idea of truth itself.
Yes.
A lot of people said that Trump was an example of that as well. But I think Putin really is. It's all disruptive camouflage, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Sanctions against Russia coming thick and fast, but Biden's announcement today seems to up the ante somewhat. This is from Wednesday's Guardian. Andrew? Stephen?
Joe Biden banned Russian oil imports over Ukraine invasion. It's the benefits of having a president who's so old that he can remember war with Russia, the Russo-Swedish War of 1495. I'm saying he's old. It's
the Winter War, possibly. Does he go back that? He might just about. He'd have been very young, but he might have been stayed up late to watch it.
Yeah, but it's a strong move in general, banning oil. But for America, it's only 3% in terms of crude oil imports. About
it's
8%.
not. It's actually it's a fairly flamboyant gesture, isn't it?
Well, the absolute value will still be large because 3% of America's imports is still 3% of a large amount.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not like Germany trying to say we'll go cold turkey.
Yeah. That's when it goes, isn't it? But how will Germany? I mean, Germany might lose it anyway. I mean, what are they going to do? Yeah. They don't even. I don't really associate them with thick woolly jumpers even. You know, some of the cultures in the Baltic, they have a tradition of knitting their way out of trouble. But
but this article is making the case. I mean, I perhaps don't know as much as you about this, but this article is saying that before the invasion, Russian oil and gas made up more than a third of government revenues. So this is a big.
Is that not? So
to Russia, I see.
Yeah.
But it's still a big deal, isn't it? If you're going to start, this is because for all the sanctions that have been put in place, there has been this continual flow of money going into the country because of oil and gas. So this is actually more than just a gesture. I think this could be. I mean, they are.
If everyone stops buying oil or gas, he's absolutely well. I mean, but the entire world economy will spin off its tracks. Maybe we have the guts to do that. It would obviously be less horrific than nuclear war, which those seem to be our main two options at the moment. So,
well, Biden's concern seemed to have been that he was saying he was reluctant to do this because of the cost to the American citizen at the petrol.
They can't quite believe how much their petrol is now up to $6 a gallon in some parts of the country. I can't remember the last time it cost $6 a gallon in this country. I look back on those days.
To see Americans complain about the price of petrol. It's like when I go back up north and buy a pint, I'm like, wow, you can still get them for £3.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But I suppose, to be fair, they have a culture which is, I call it a culture, but, you know, they have a system, a way of being which is heavily reliant on the internal combustion engine in a way that ours isn't. We do have a more metropolitan sort of existence, I think, and so on. There are people who do several hundred miles a week in their pickup truck. You know?
Everything in the UK is nearer.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's basic geography, really, isn't it?
So much of their, all of their, the honky-tonk bars, the pickup trucks.
Yeah.
Country and Western songs are going to be devastating. I would imagine there will be albums addressing this as we speak. Wednesday's Times next. Poland could be playing a risky game of Risk, it says. Who's got that one? Is this the Air Force thing?
Yeah, this is about the lending of some MiG-29 fighter jets. Lending's an interesting one. I mean, you kind of Do you expect to get it back? There'll be some.
Well, it has precedent, doesn't it? Second World War, Lend-Lease. That was how America sort of helped Britain before it was drawn in.
Yeah. And I think it's a good way of doing this.
Yeah.
Interesting how Poland are getting around it. So there's only a few countries that still maintain that type of jet that Ukraine are used to, and there's an issue about training up for different. But I'd be willing to have a go at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows how long this is going to go on for? But Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, said that Poland could suffer blowback from supplying to Ukraine. He said we've got to tread a very fine line with us in terms of the UK not triggering a wider war. But a lot of what he says feels like, we'd better not fight them too well in case it makes them angry.
Yeah.
Again, it's that point again, isn't it? It's like just because of their military might, we should back off, and it's a very fearful kind of.
Well, also you have to wonder if he's invaded. I mean, he does try and pretend or like present that he's doing like in peacekeeping forces and to secure the independence of the eastern provinces and so on. But so there is a very, very thin veneer of the proper protocols being observed by Putin. But I can't think that if he felt that Britain and America were, to all intents and purposes, joining in,
yes,
that he would allow the letter of the law to prevent him from escalating.
He's made a couple of sort of mild threatening overtures, when talking about Britain's participation here, just in terms of what we have been doing. And, it's interesting because we're talking here about whether Poland will then be a next target because of these contributions that they're making and the possibility of Britain being a target. But we have spent several £100 million on aid, on weapons, on training, this kind of thing. We've pledged millions of pounds more this week, so we're now in it.
I think, in a way, I think we have done pretty well. I will say that. I don't want to, partisan sort of Brexit jokes aside and so on. I think actually Johnson's done pretty well on this. To the extent that it's Johnson specifically.
It's interesting though, because a lot of people, for partisan reasons, appear to be saying the government's doing nothing. Why won't Boris do anything? I think the Mirror had a picture of him with a photoshopped Russian hat on, and lots of conspiracy theorists talking about the Russian interference with Brexit. And it's nonsense. Like there's been a lot has been done by the British government.
General Petraeus, famous, of course, from the troop surge in Iraq. I think that was his primary claim to fame, wasn't it? But he was, I don't know if it was a tweet or something slightly more dignified, but I think it was a tweet, said that Britain had been on point, as he put it, essentially the military term for, leading from the front.
Yeah.
He was very impressed with their commitment and unambiguous support,
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody has their interests that they protect, and everybody has certain red lines that they don't want to cross. And it is legitimate to say that the Tory government probably are slightly more compromised in terms of Russian billionaires than is ideal at this point.
Sure, but it's this idea that if they're not carrying all the oligarchs off to prison in chains immediately, they're not doing anything. And I just think that's not true. There is a limit to what Boris Johnson can do because of what we've been discussing, because of the threats.
The British approach has always been, or at least always been, throughout this century at any rate, has always been to attempt to provide support where it's happening as well. And a lot of people on the left immediately focus and zero in on how many refugees are we taking, how much have we dismantled the usual processes that you have to go through in order. And I think the right-wing approach is to say we want the Ukrainian people to carry on living in Ukraine. I tend to agree with that personally.
You can't measure both at once.
Oh, of course you can, yeah.
I think that.
But people don't, that's what I mean. I mean, you can, one should, a news programme like this certainly should. Two people squabbling in a pub. John Bercow has been banned from the House of Commons for bullying. This is from Wednesday's Independent, Andrew, and I can't say
You're not surprised?
I'm not surprised, and I'm ever so slightly delighted. There
will be an element of Schadenfreude here, since he was obviously a very partisan speaker when it came to Brexit. But I mean, here we have Bercow, who obviously was accused of being a serial bully. There have been 21 separate allegations against him made by 3 complainants. All of them have been upheld. It's quite a damning report, calling him a serial bully. He's got a lifetime ban for holding a parliamentary pass as a result of this. And the way that some of the things were described, verbal abuse, displays of anger, undermining behaviour, and this kind of thing.
He's built for undermining, to be fair.
Yeah, but you wonder, though, is he really this kind of Malcolm Tucker kind of figure, or is he just something from a different age?
He's a pompous twit, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Pompous is the word for him.
But
just loves the sound of his own voice and loves to have an impact on any sort of group he's in, I think.
Well, I would imagine that within the cut and thrust of Parliament, there are some quite aggressive personalities that you have to sort of navigate. But look, I don't know what happened. I've got absolutely no idea. He's also been called in this report a serial liar. But it's quite interesting because when they said they're taking away his parliamentary pass, his response was, well, the panel have said I should be denied a parliamentary pass, which I never applied for and do not want. And he's very much like, well, I didn't want it anyway. It's very kind of truculent, isn't it? It's a bit, it's quite childish. It's what a kid would say.
Poorly judged, to be honest, isn't it? Really, what do you think, Steve?
I like that second point because that means like Aesop can sit down for a while. We've got a new example.
Burkoff's pass.
Yeah, but look, even if the motivating factor for some of this is retribution, revenge, whatever disgruntled thing causes it, the key would be if you want to make sure no one can ever do you for bullying, don't bully. I think there is a generational part to this. There's certainly an attitudinal part to this. That you think that shouting at someone shows that you're passionately doing your job. That attitude needs to change. There's no reason.
No, and it sounds like there were some quite specific descriptions of how the bullying manifested. They were like imitating people's voices, mimicking. Yeah. That is nasty and cruel. If it's, I mean, it can be if it's done in good.
I mean, it can be as a jest.
It can be fun, but it's quite clear that these people didn't experience it that way, and that is actually quite.
I mean, I would agree with Steve.
Childish.
I think in the workplace there's no excuse. I've never raised my voice at anyone in the work. I don't see why you would. I don't see why it gets anything done. But it is a generational thing. I've worked for people who just scream their heads off. I worked in a kitchen, and believe me, the chefs, they would let rip. It's very scary, actually. Yeah. They're armed. They've got cutlers.
I'd like to see him take over from Gordon Ramsay. That would be an interesting.
Well, it would work.
Opportunity. Burkow's kitchen disaster. We've reached the end of part one. Coming up in part two, we will be discussing the worst drop in living standards since the 1970s, the French presidential election, and how men became obsolete sooner than we thought. Don't go away. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, and I'm joined by Stephen Allen and Andrew Doyle. So this next story, Steve, I think will amuse you and give you some material to work with. The notorious Proud Boys have made the headlines in Wednesday's Independent. It's an odd story, this, though.
Yeah, I suppose it's odd. Well, so the long-time leader of what they've called in the Independent, extremist Western chauvinist Proud Boys group.
EWC.
Yeah, you could have gone for any of those. But Enrique Tarrio will face conspiracy charges related to the 6th of January riot at the US Capitol. Turns out, if you're involved in a riot, it doesn't bode so well for your legal status.
But he wasn't. That's the interesting thing.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't there.
But
no.
he
had been arrested. If I got this right, I had to look through the story. He was arrested and served time for burning a Black Lives Matter flag or a banner. I don't think you can call that a flag, can you?
It was, yeah, a banner.
Yeah.
It's an interesting excuse, though, isn't it? An interesting defence. No, Your Honour, there is no way my client could have been there. He was too busy serving time from burning Black Lives Matter banners.
Yeah,
it's an interesting defence.
I just think that's a dubious level of sentencing for burning a banner. But I know that's not not the news story.
So his new accusations are that he was distributing paramilitary gear and supplies to the would-be rioters and directing, mobilising and leading it. And there's also some, in the court case, they've been getting messages that they've been sending in the higher-ups in this Proud Boys. In one message, he says, let's get radical, let's get real men. So I think we can probably do him for sexism as well.
Let's get radical as a Pointer Sister song.
Is that Pointer Sister?
Olivia Newton-John.
Was Olivia Newton-John, sorry, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, they could get him to sexism. I mean, if they got him for burning a flag, a banner, sorry, then why not do that as well? I mean, it does strike me as an odd thing. I mean, he actually was served jail time, didn't he, for this flag burning?
And he's not. I think it's quite interesting. The Proud Boys. They're an odd one. I mean, I'm not saying there are no doubt not just some bad apples. I'm sure there is a degree of cover. But he himself is Afro-Cuban, as he describes.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's
not a white supremacist. Well, if he is, he would be the craziest one.
If he is, he's a self-hating white supremacist.
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think there is a degree of. I think there is a degree to which the Proud Boys are more like an old-fashioned Hells Angels gang.
Aren't they mostly a bunch of stupid kids who just sort of,
they like taking on Antifa, don't they? Who are also a bunch of stupid kids.
Exactly.
There's a few of them.
It feels like a very much sort of culture war kind of thing. I mean, we always hear about what white supremacists they are, but apparently they've got all over their website about how anti-white supremacy they are, and how
they're more like a men's rights activist thing. Actually.
Yeah,
I think it's more anti-feminism than. But it's interesting. I watched one of those Louis Theroux programs the other night on the other channel.
Oh, yes.
One of these kind of crazy America things. And he was visiting various hard-right extremists, and I had to pretend to my wife I'd never heard of any of these people, let alone following them on Twitter. But there's one called Nick Fuentes, who was banned from Twitter a couple of years ago. And he leads something called America First, which claims, again, that it's not racist, it's just sort of Catholic, but it would like to see a white majority maintained. Louis Theroux asked him about he said about the January 6th insurrection, and Fuentes said, it's not an insurrection, I don't think that's the right term. And Louis said, oh, OK, what would you call it? And he said, a riot. Which I thought, well, that's no better, is it? If you're going to stop him, I would have gone for kerfuffle or something like that. You know, if you're going to downplay it a little bit. Yeah.
A lot of those groups are just...
The January 6th misunderstanding.
I find them a bit pathetic, and I see figures like that, and I think these are largely driven by ego. There's a lot of people... There is that weird mix. I think there's quite a few wrong uns are attracted to that.
But there is definitely a sense, I get, that the American establishment, I'm not going to say the deep state, but I think to some extent the Democratic Party, but also the establishment, are trying to keep the fear that, democracy was in the balance on that day.
Well, they're
trying to keep it alive, and I think it's crazy. I think it's counterproductive.
It was nuts. I mean, comparing it to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, it's obviously in the interest of the Democrats to pretend that this was the moment when American democracy almost died, and it was a few people in horns moving desks.
But the idea is that Trump might still be the GOP candidate next time around, and do you really want to rerun that? Wednesday's Independent next, some stark warnings from economists. Andrew?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, this is the UK facing the worst drop in living standards since the 1970s. This is what economists are now saying. We've come straight out of the pandemic, and then we're into this cost of living crisis, and then the war in Ukraine. Apparently, this is having a major impact.
I would have been astonished if it didn't.
Yeah, of course.
In fact, I'm amazed that we're all still, reasonably well-dressed and
well, they're saying it's going to drop. Average income's going to drop by £1,000 on average, and then incomes are set to fall by 4%. 4%. In the financial year ahead. Inflation could overtake 8.4% this spring, which would be the highest level since 1982. It's not good news Obviously, the conflict in Ukraine is going to drive up the energy prices.
Yeah.
We're going in that direction anyway, and this is kind of
and we're all
certainly
going to be
exacerbating
facing
the problem.
extra costs. But I don't think it's going to be too bad in the UK. I think America is really going to feel some pain because America has got to make some decisions about whether it wants to maintain its role as kind of world policeman, overwhelming military power, you know, and that's not cheap in these situations.
No.
I was listening to someone being interviewed on radio talking about why, in terms of inflation, it won't be as bad as the 70s. And this economist said, the good news is, back in the 70s, there was a system that let inflation and wage increase go hand in hand, but we won't have the second part. Oh, great.
Yes. And that system was the unions, I suppose, was it? Is that what he was talking about?
I suppose so, but he was more just looking on the fact that right now there won't be a link between everything costs more, but don't worry, you won't be able to afford it.
You won't be able to afford it, so it will top out at a certain point.
But starvation.
Yeah, well, be very interesting to see what kind of policies are brought in to mitigate it. You know, I don't know whether they will be thinking in terms of wage caps, and I think we'll probably see some industrial unrest. That will increase the 70s vibe. Calls for police officers to require regular licence to practice test. What does this mean, a licence to practice?
Yeah, so a police licence, I guess it's a little bit like a TV licence, but it will be cheaper because they dress in black and white. That's an old school joke.
And radio, of course.
So the idea is that they should have a licence to practice.
Yeah.
And why not? Because doctors do, and police have more control over you than doctors. You know, you can say no to a doctor.
Do they have to renew their licence to practice, doctors?
Yeah, they have to do.
They do.
Just renew it. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, doctors, you know, you can say no to. Doctors tend to not handcuff you. Unless my latest prostate test was anything to go by. But in this strategic review of policing suggests that bonuses might be another part of it as well.
Right.
And I was sat in earlier on thinking about this, the idea of if you solve a crime, you actually get a bonus.
Yeah.
Might actually sort out the policing issue.
Maybe they could a little bonus on your burglaries. Yeah.
But the problem is, so you like the
sort
idea...
of law of salvage almost.
Yeah. But you like the idea of thinking, OK, if these police don't meet the standard to renew their licence, we will sort out the problems. What are the problems with the police? There aren't enough of them.
Yeah.
So firing police is probably not the way to solve it.
I mean, that's definitely... This article talks about how there's a shortfall of 6,581 detectives, which has contributed to the low prosecution rates for burglary, rape and fraud. But the good news is they've got plenty of time to investigate people for offensive tweets. There's a lot of that going on. The reason why I am nervous about having a retraining programme where police have to fulfil the standards is who is setting the standards? The College of Policing guidelines need to be massively overhauled. There's all sorts of issues going on there. And
Are they being sort of re-educated? Is that what you're concerned?
They've become very politicised, haven't they?
Yeah.
And they've become politicised because of the guidelines from the College of Policing. And you know, even after they've been told non-crime hate incidents are illegal, you can no longer record them, the College of Policing says, oh, we'll just change the language and we'll keep on doing it.
Yeah.
The College of Policing have been ideologically captured, and that will filter down. Whenever you retrain police officers, it could make the situation worse, not better. That's
if they're retraining for a licence which reflects the new ideological...
Yeah, if they were retraining to be better police, I'd love it.
I remember just revisiting the comparison you made to GPs. I had a friend about 30 years ago who used to sell drugs to GPs, you know, legally, obviously, on behalf of one of the big pharmaceutical companies. And he said you would be astonished how little they remember of what they learned, you know, at med school.
Yeah.
You know, after 10 years on the job, they really do actually rely quite heavily on the reps who come round and say, this is the new treatment for piles or, you know, whatever.
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I've forgotten everything I did in my driving test.
Yeah.
But I still drive.
Absolutely.
It's not really very
Mirror
good,
signal manoeuvre, when was the last time you did that?
Well, exactly.
It's coming, I'm going to signal.
No, there's a good case for it, isn't there?
Yeah, I suppose the point is that police officers don't have there's no commercial interests who are trying to sort of sell them the new truncheon or whatever.
Truncheon.
Emmanuel Macron has started to announce policies in preparation for the French election. This is from Wednesday's Telegraph, Andrew.
Yeah, it's always interesting with French elections because you never quite know which way it's going to go. And he's pledging to scrap the French licence fee. That's an interesting approach because that's what his two main right-wing rivals are saying that they want to do as well. And obviously that's...
Who is what, Marine Le Pen?
Marine Le Pen and Eric Zemmour.
And Zemmour is still a contender, this.
Yeah, I mean,
quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Because it's looking as though they're both sort of far to the right and they're splitting the far right vote likely. That's probably what's going to happen. And it's just an interesting approach. But he is taking a very different approach, whereas they're taking the kind of populist, we're going to have the rallies, we're going to have the flags and all this kind of thing. Emmanuel Macron launched his campaign in this very small little gathering at a place called Poissy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Poissy. It's a tiny little area, and they just had a chat, a conversation about local people's concerns. Very low risk because the area was massively predisposed to Macron anyway. So it's a very different approach to everything.
Sounds a bit Corbyn-esque.
Yeah, could be. But I suppose he's flying high in the polls to such a degree.
Is he?
I don't think. But then you never know with French elections. It can.
Yeah. But he's in that situation where he's got everything to lose and nothing to gain, so he'll just keep out of the spotlight for the time being.
He's
bit like Johnson did in the last election, and everyone was like infuriated.
Oh yes, because he wouldn't have an interview, would he?
Yeah.
And he was keeping himself to
skipping
himself.
around the back of Andrew Neil.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you allowed to say that name on here?
You absolutely are. I mean, I wonder with Macron, he's already made a bit of a blunder with this EU flag business. I mean, now that obviously, the election's in April, but from January, France is now the president, in charge of the EU, I suppose.
Oh, are they? Right.
And so it's the rotating presidency of the EU, and he started, throwing the EU flag colours onto the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame Cathedral, and he put a big flag on the Arc de Triomphe, the EU flag, and that's actually not great for his support base because France is a massively Eurosceptic country. Had to take the flag down ultimately. So I don't know what will happen.
I always hope it will go to the wire, just for the fun.
Exciting,
really.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I think one of these days a tyrant will rise again in France. This next story from Wednesday's Mail seems like something that should have been done a long time ago, Steve. This is I'm guessing, I've only gone on that, but is this sturgeon?
No,
it's not. Okay,
exactly.
no, okay. Oh, this really should have been done a long time ago. Okay,
Yeah.
There's another one. You'll know what it is when it comes up. The other one.
To America, Congress finally passed legislation making lynching a hate crime.
Yeah.
A maximum sentence of 30 years, and you read that and you think, oh, it's about time they got round to getting rid of this lynching lark. They're calling it the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act.
So lynching has been illegal, surely.
It has been illegal to lynch someone.
Yeah.
But
lynching is essentially an extrajudicial hanging. Is it always a hanging, or is that just a?
No, I guess it's now they're changing the definition to include conspiracy. So it's about having this plan of what you're doing to someone to kill someone in that way.
Yeah.
Bill was been named after a black teenager who was brutally killed back in 1955
for whistling at a white woman or something. Yeah.
And so it's been difficult to get this through. 200 times they've tried to get this through, and you think who's holding back, thinking like, well, lynching's not great, but hang on. Turns out there were still some no votes. Even though it's passed, there were a few no votes, all from Republicans. One of them, which was Thomas Mazie of Kentucky, said he voted against the bill over concerns that it would impede on states' rights and freedom of speech. I know Americans love that phrase.
Freedom of speech.
And I know you can express yourself in many ways.
Yeah.
Creative dance, perhaps. Painting. But I do not think that a lynching is a form of communication.
What do you think, Andrew? Can you see some reason why it's...
Yes, I can see the reason. I mean, the logic there is that once you start talking about hate crime, and in other words, you are kind of policing the motivation behind the crime rather than the crime itself. What inevitably happens is those kind of appellations get thrown onto various speeches or...
Appellations, a different meaning in...
So I think I get the point. The Emmett Till murder was notoriously horrific, and it very, suggestions of To Kill a Mockingbird, same kind of situation there, where someone is accused of assaulting a white woman, and it was very famous because the mother insisted on an open casket to make the point about the horror of this crime. And of course, lynching. Well, it has been illegal. It is illegal. It has been illegal.
I'll tell you what, though, because I saw it and I had a look on Wikipedia just to sort of go, how has this happened, and read through it for a bit. One thing that was interesting, I found there were about 4,500 lynchings between, I think, the end of the Civil War and the Second World War. 3/4 of them, almost all of them were on men. About 3/4 of them were on black men, and about 3,000 were on black men and 1,000 on white men.
Well, that's interesting, because I thought lynching had to be racially motivated.
No, it turns out not. It was essentially, I think it's rural communities taking the law into their own hands when they don't think that the state can be relied upon to do so. But as often as not, that would turn out to be because they felt that they were policing I
mean, my view on it is that, with hate crime, I'd rather just apply the law and not start digging around for what you think the motivation is in people's heads. I think if someone attacks me, I want them to go to prison, not because I'm gay, but
Yeah.
because they attacked me, you know.
But we already pay attention to motivation in law. We just call it intent.
Yeah, but that... Well, no.
No, that's different. The intent meaning it wasn't an accidental punch on the nose.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the difference between manslaughter and murder. I'm talking about the idea of, OK, so why did you attack this person?
That's an important aspect to deciding what the appropriate sentence is. Did you intend to do it, or did you just trip and...
So I agree with you on that in terms of intention, but it doesn't matter to me if someone attacks me because of my sexuality or because they just hate me for some other reason. I want the law applied equally in all of those cases. I just think I don't see the purpose of doing otherwise.
I just think there is an opportunity to possibly prove intent by looking at motivation. At the very least, there's some overlap in that Venn diagram, which means if I could prove someone had attacked you because of your sexuality, I've proved there's some intent to it.
Yeah, but then you're still punishing them for the act. You're not punishing them because of the homophobia, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of part 2. If you want to hear about pardoned witches, and that explains my faux pas earlier, vigilante eco-warriors and a landlady sticking it to Putin, don't go away. We'll see you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to part 3 of Headliners. I am still your host. I'm still Simon Evans, and going through Wednesday's papers with me are Steve N. Allen and Andrew Doyle. So, this is from Wednesday's Times. Has science gone too far, Steve?
They're playing God, which I'm sure someone will say that in the comments section. Yeah. Fatherless mice raise the possibility of virgin births in humans, or in that case, let's keep these mice away from our women.
Yeah.
What they've done is...
Fatherless mice, they're going to become delinquents, aren't they?
I mean, this is one of those things where it's a great bit of science, but the way the newspapers go about it, straight into, what does it mean for humans? Calm yourself a little bit. Like years ago...
It's probably 5 years away, isn't it?
At least 5. Well, it was 30 years ago. There was that mouse with an ear growing on its back, and I don't have an ear on my back, so...
But you say that. You know, Alex Jones, famous conspiracy theorist, I saw an interview with him, I think it was on Joe Rogan, and Rogan said to him, of all the things that you've been desperately trying to convince people are true and they won't believe it, what is it? And he said that they're using animals to grow human organs. And so I looked it up, and of course the very next week somebody had the first pig-grown liver. So it does happen, you know. I mean, that's not quite the same as an ear, but that sort of thing is happening, isn't it?
Yeah, and the bladder was the first organ to be grown out of stem cells. These things, if you are the Alex Jones type, you could do that and say that, they're all, trying to over-medicate you. Well, I mean, sometimes I do dip into his podcast for the laugh. Spends half of it saying, like, they're trying to give you medicines you don't need. Meanwhile, buy my vitamins.
Yeah, yes.
Every time. But this is the prospect of women being able to conceive without men.
Yeah.
What they've done, Chinese researchers have, and they've brought this out on International Women's Day, perfect, your movement, parthenogenesis, what they've managed to create.
Love that word.
This ancient Greek word for virgin birth.
2,500 years ago, they were ahead of us already.
Yeah.
They cracked it.
But they should be, because reptiles can do this in an afternoon.
It's in Jurassic Park, isn't it? Don't the dinosaurs start to do it?
Yeah.
Yes, but isn't Jurassic Park a cautionary tale
Yeah.
when it comes to this kind of thing? I'm sorry, Steve, I
can't help feeling in China they're going back to front. They've created the opportunity for women to get pregnant without men. In fact, it's women they're short of, isn't it, in China?
Although it'll take longer to get men to get pregnant without women.
I suppose so, yeah.
I think I remember seeing...
You want to create eggs without women. There will be, like, what do you call it, like automatic wombs, not automatic, what am I saying? Like
automatic womb?
Automatic wombs, it's an old T-Rex B-side. No, there's a sort of, like an incubator that you can grow a lamb now in a an artificial womb.
I don't want to grow a lamb.
You can. I'm just saying you can.
No, but why do we have to do this? I do feel, and I'm sorry, I do get nervous about this sort of the rapidly advancing technology, partly because I don't understand it. I will concede that. But I just think, yes, to recall what you said earlier, let's not play God. There's a reason why. We don't grow lambs.
You've chosen to be gay and to not contribute to the and now you're complaining because poor desperate women unable to get their hands on your seed.
Yes.
Are forced instead to...
I mean, all sorts of images are being conjured right now, which I think are best
they're protesting outside.
Yeah.
They need to get.
They need it.
I will actually...
It is interesting, though. Can we just... Because you are a scientist, Steve. Give us a little bit of detail. OK, have you grasped what's being done? Is it not just cloning, right? It's different from cloning.
It's not cloning, and the problem is you get yourself an egg, you need the male gamete to go in there. You can't just add some DNA information. It doesn't work. They've changed these ends. I didn't write down the name of it. It was some sort of methyl something or other, the chemical that then makes a piece of DNA but able to act like it's coming from the father.
Right.
Basically, you can construct a full egg with all the DNA material that it needs, and then that can go on to...
Just from the female?
Just from the female.
So are these not going to be very feminine mice that emerge?
No, they'll be tweaked.
They've got no father element in there. It's science.
No, that's the point. They are
tweaking
tweaking them, right? They are doing a little bit of gene editing to introduce a Y chromosome. Yeah.
Okay.
But they still arguably won't be brought up with enough male mice in the household.
Exactly. I'm very mistrustful.
And I imagine their nursery schools are entirely... But yeah.
Should you say... Don't run away with this. Sexual reproduction is still great.
It's still the default method.
It's sometimes the best 3 minutes of your day, but it's also without it we don't get evolution. So no one's going to think this is the future.
Good point. Well, Fish and other sea life have been using litter that we so flippantly dispose of. The octopus wombles.
Yes. Well, octopuses are very, very well, not like wombles actually, because wombles, of course, were cleaning up all the litter.
Oh right.
The octopuses, octopi, octopodes. They've been manipulated more like the A-Team insofar as they're using the litter.
MacGyver.
In sort of in very creative ways. So, for instance, it says here that octopus sheltering inside glass bottles, cans, even an old battery, burying themselves under a mixture of bottle tops and seashells. They're very intelligent. The old octopus. And
there was a bit in there where it said there was one that it was spotted walking across the seafloor with using its arms to hold on to its loot.
Yes.
It was sort of walking across on two remaining legs in like a stilt walker.
Yeah, well, apparently that helps conceal it from predators in some...
Because they don't realise what it is. I mean, octopuses are incredible.
They are.
I do love them. They are extraordinary.
Have you read Toilers of the Sea by Victor Hugo? Because
no.
Once you read that and you read The Octopus...
You don't love them. I know there's a passage... The book I did read was called Other Minds, and it was about the extent to which octopuses are probably the closest thing to aliens we'll ever encounter.
Right.
It's written by a philosopher who also likes to scuba dive in Australia, and he found a kind of colony of octopuses. It's apparently they diverged from us... I think, is it 6 million years ago or something? Like a really, really long time ago. Yeah. They're basically related to slugs, aren't they? They're mollusks.
Yeah.
And they have achieved an intelligence which is comparable with a border collie.
Yeah.
But they have no... People laugh when I say this, and I don't mean it cruelly, but they have no culture. It's not some Australian joke. They have no culture because they cannot pass on their learning one to another, even to the extent that horses and chimps and dogs can. they just hatch in the middle of the sea and they have to make everything up from scratch. They have no role models at all. If we could introduce role models into octopus lives...
They would take over.
And the mice.
They'd be off, yeah.
There is a lovely story about how clever octopuses are, and this is why you should never eat them ever again. Some research place, I think it was in America, where they were studying octopuses, and every so often they'd go in and the lights had fused.
Yeah.
And what was happening was the octopus were thinking, it's a bit light in here overnight. And they'd learnt to squirt water at the light switch, fuse the lights, and at least the lights went off. Next day, they refixed the fuse. That night, they do it again.
There's another story where one was sneaking out of its tank and eating some fish that were in another tank and then sneaking back into its tank. There's all kinds of weird stories about mischievous octopus. And then, of course, there was Paul, the German octopus that
predicted the future.
Predicted the...
so they're prophets as well.
Teams.
They're going to take over. That's
and then he died before the Euros. It was absolutely tragic.
Yeah.
They have such short lives. If we can extend their lifespan, I think we would really learn something. The Twitter bots were out on International Women's Day. This is from Wednesday's Metro. Who's got this?
I've got this. The story of a Twitter bot spent the day retweeting companies that were trying to get some good International Women's Day PR.
Yeah.
It then retweeted their tweets with information on the gender pay gap of those companies, which actually is not a bad check. If you've got to try and get some of this looking good about it, be good about it. The data uses the median hourly pay, so it doesn't fall down at the normal. The first accusation is these figures aren't representative of... It doesn't take into account part-time work and things like that. Well, this would.
Okay.
And
median hourly pay rather than total annual takings. Yeah. What do you think, Andrew? Is reasonable?
Well, there, yeah, I suppose, but there are still reasons to say that it's not quite as simple as... the way this is often interpreted is that women are paid less for the same work as men, and as you say, that's
Which
not...
isn't how capitalism works,
No,
is it?
and it hasn't... even if you take out the part-time element to this, there are still people choosing different jobs and taking different career paths, and,
also not working hard enough.
But there's also the age element. There is also the age element in terms of, there are more successful older men. If you're in your 20s, you're more likely to earn more money as a woman than as a man these days. So, I think there's a lot of stuff about...
You know who does earn more money than everyone else, don't you?
No.
Gay men.
Do they?
Yeah. I mean, significantly more. And certainly in
Is
America...
Is that just because we don't have children?
They're better educated, significantly better educated. I mean, several notches further, longer time in education, and then earn more and work longer hours and more ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew I made the right choice.
And then refuse to share their seed and force people to fall back on some weird mouse-derived technology. Anyway, Nicola Sturgeon has corrected an historic injustice. This is where I thought you were going earlier with the Emmett Till one. So this is something that should have happened a long, long time ago,
so
if it was going to happen.
If it was going to happen. So Nicola Sturgeon has issued a formal apology to the thousands of women who were executed as witches. Apparently, an estimated 4,000 Scots were accused of being witches between 1563 and 1736 under the Witchcraft Act of 1563, which I'm happy to say was repealed. That no longer applies, so that's a good thing. The apology, it's a bit too little too late, isn't it? Although it's interesting, I was looking into this, and the reason why... it's not just Scotland, obviously across Europe there were all sorts of swathes of hysteria around witches. The most common reason why women were accused of witchcraft is because they said they were witches and they sold spells. That is the most common reason.
They were
witches.
They were like homeopaths, though. It was just
I'm believing them when they say they were witches, But it's an interesting...
Believe witches when they tell you they're witches.
It's interesting that the apology has gone... obviously, everyone's dead. Everyone who perpetrated
this would have been
dead.
ecclesiastical courts as well, not something Nicola Sturgeon has any authority in, even now. She doesn't represent, a long line of witch-finders.
It's very much a gesture. She's saying the reason why she's doing this is because misogyny is still embedded in society. That's why.
One last story before we go. 4x4 drivers, watch out, vigilante eco-warriors are about. Who's got that?
I've got this. It's such a great story of... they've been going around getting an SUV, letting its tyres down, because we can't have too many SUVs. They are bad for the planet. Some research from New Scientist say that they're undoing all of the good environmental gains from electric cars. Only problem is, they were going around also doing electric cars, leaving notes on them. So let's hope that's recycled paper.
Well, you're going to have to start putting a big E on your windscreen or something when you leave your car now. And I did notice, because we live near Brighton, and Brighton was one of the hotspots that gets hit. I do think there's a degree of hypocrisy in my fellow residents in Brighton. They like to pretend they're very green. because they say, but it is still 2 tons of metal you're moving around, to take your kids to school in. It is absurd. What do you think?
Well, it's always funny, isn't it, when the activist thing backfires a little bit?
Yeah.
It's like when they cause the congestion with their blockades in town, and they end up creating more air pollution. There's a bit of hypocrisy there.
But that's a good spend. If you spend some carbon to save a massive ton of carbon in the future, you can argue that away. But getting people who've already put the effort into buying an electric car, and then you manage to get them.
There was one fella, he sounded really aggrieved. He was like, I did loads of research. I bought the absolute best one. But of course, I still don't believe that. I think you're better off buying a 10-year-old car, because the vast amount of energy used to create a new car is always overlooked in these things. Do you know what I mean? People always go, we better upgrade our car every couple of years in order to be slightly more green, because it looks green. But actually, the most green thing you can do is to keep your Ford Fiesta on the road for 25 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Although, if you give it long enough.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to my guest, Andrew Doyle. Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Stephen Allen.
Goodbye.
Headliners will be back at the same time tomorrow. Till then, cheerio.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.